grew up in Sheepshead Bay, which is part of Brooklyn, close-knit community. Dad was born in Poland. My mom actually was born here. I was very close to my dad, the most significant person in my life. He and I both got ham radio licenses. I started getting more and more interested in radio, and I thought communications was just amazing. My senior year of college, I was at Cornell undergraduate, ready to go to medical school. He died of cancer. I asked medical school for a year off, which they gave me.
This is a guy who had nothing. All he had was his brains, work ethic, and his drive.
I was living in a contractor's basement in Ithaca, New York, not knowing what I was doing with myself, making some money part-time teaching a doctor how to play tennis. He would have to go to a payphone and call in to see if he was needed in the emergency room. I said, "You don't have a pager?" And he said, "No, there's no paging system in Ithaca." And I said to myself, wow, I think I could do that. First thing I did is I called Motorola, and he said, "Look, why don't you learn the business of the second most important person in my life was an individual by the name of Milt Rubenstein, who owned a huge paging system in Syracuse, New York." And Milt said, "I'll teach you the business." I learned the technical end of the business, the sales end of the business. And I went back to Motorola. I needed $100,000 to buy the equipment and the pagers, get the license from both the FCC and the Public Service Commission. Being in upstate New York, I expanded not just to the Ithaca, Cortland area, but I looked for pretty much every market that was open and expanded my paging business.
A guy with good education, but no real assets, finding a way to get into and be part of the number one market in the United States.
Kenny was involved with what was then called CSI. We were competitors. Stu came in and bought a substantial percentage of CSI.
Controlling 60% of that partnership.
With the understanding that group would file together. They were all radio common carriers that had all filed for the market and decided to share. One of the issues with that group was you had a lot of big egos. What Kenny brought to the table was the ability to take those people, meld them, and get them to cooperate with each other on the application so that Metro Media would buy them.
We started to look at territories around New York that were going to be in the next group. But we used Ken to basically go through all of that, help us put all of that together.
It was a monopoly game, and we were trading pieces with each other, looking at how many people might have cell phones in the market, what that market was, the size, making adjustments.
He was influential in getting the FCC to agree to allow the non-wireline cellular telephone operators to resell the wireline cellular telephone operators. The wireline cellular telephone companies had already carved out who was going to do what in what markets. So they were way ahead of the game. And they already had a lot of the equipment in place that they could use to deliver cellular telephone services. What the ruling at the commission allowed us to do was to sell services on their network as if it was ours. It allowed us to build a customer base and stay competitive with the wireline.
It was great competing with the phone company. I pretty much was out of cellular by '94. Sold everything. I thought the next thing after cellular would be satellite. I invested in Iridium. I invested in American Mobile Satellite Company. To me, that was the obvious next step, continuing to get involved in other forms of communications that I thought would one day take the place or in the very least augment cellular.
What Ken brought to the table was an understanding of the technology, an understanding of the hardware involved, understanding of what operations were required to make the operation successful.
It was a great ride. It was just, we knew we were on a mission that was going to improve people's lives. I'm fortunate to have been a part of it.